Today's webinar is Brokerage Moneyball, Trusting Data Over Your Gut, brought to you by TRIBUS. What TRIBUS is showing us today is how to use resources you already have in place to determine the best, most profitable path forward for your business. TRIBUS is also offering a complimentary workbook to webinar attendees, which you can use to guide you through the changing real estate landscape, and we'll learn more about that near the end of the session. I'm joined today by a whole bunch of people. Jeff Harris, VP of Business Development for TRIBUS, Deirdre LaPera, Director of Business Development for Real Trends, Brenda Tusshouse, COO of Remax Results, and our webinar moderator today is Lori Weston Davis, an Inman Ambassador and owner of Better Homes and Gardens Lifestyle Property Partners. Glad to have this all-star team with us today, and you can take it away when you're ready.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Devin said, we're going to be talking Brokerage Moneyball today. Actually, two topics that are really near and dear to my heart, running a brokerage and data. So bringing that all together. I know you've all seen the movie with, is it Brad Pitt? Wasn't Brad Pitt in that movie, the Moneyball? Yep. Talking about using data and, he was running a baseball team a little better and making it more successful, more profitable, I guess, in the end. And that's a little bit like what we're going to focus on today. So we're going to have three different perspectives, one kind of the broad, and then narrowing it down a little bit more, and then seeing the actual practice. So first we're going to start off with Jeff Harris of TRIBUS. He's the Vice President of Business Development, and we're going to let Jeff kick it off.
Great. Thank you, Lori. Next slide, please. So before we talk about Brokerage Moneyball, it's probably worth a quick bit of history to give this some context. There's a pendulum of control swinging between brokerages and agents, and it used to be brokerages used to have much more control than they do today. Being a real estate agent used to be exclusively a full-time job. It used to be that the for sale signs pounded in the ground only promoted the brokerages and never the agent. However, since the 1970s, with the founding of Remax, that pendulum has been swinging farther towards agents. Agents wanted more and more control over their marketing and get higher commission splits, and brokers lost control over their marketing and now have no idea what's going out there with their names on it. So with that shift in control and agents in more control, brokerages are viewed by some agents as social clubs. Empty offices predominate throughout the week until the weekly meeting where some agents gather to eat and see other agents and hear what the manager is sharing that week. Many brokerages are stocked with agents who sell 1 or 2 homes a year for vacation money, and it seems from a brokerage perspective like you're spending no money to keep these people around, and some brokerages make lots and lots of money off of these people with their higher broker splits and even off of a lower GCI. And on paper, it may look like you should keep as many of these people around as you can, but instead, this is an opportunity to give lots of support to more productive agents. And as a result of this pendulum shift, according to Steve Murray of Real Trends, this is an interesting stat, over the last 5 years, the percentage of brokerages' commission dollars retained fell from 31% to 18.5%, and profit margins are getting squeezed. This is not a sustainable business model. Now, what can we do to help the brokerage fight this trend? Next slide. So as Lori mentioned at the top, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, let me explain Moneyball. In baseball, many pro teams used to draft young players right out of high school, but recruiting high school players was a very subjective effort. Baseball scouts, usually former players themselves, evaluated players subjectively using phrases like looks good in the uniform, or they've got quick feet or a strong arm, and that's kind of represented by what you see on the left of your screen. But smaller teams could not afford to draft these unproven players who turned out into busts when they got into the major leagues. So one smaller market team, the Oakland A's, hired Ivy League statisticians to approach it from a different perspective and to help identify stats that would result in more successful players. And the statisticians started using college players with lots of data about their playing as a predictor of future performance. And as a result, the Oakland A's was able to discover quality talent from lesser recruited schools and put together a winning team on their small market budget. And really the same is true for real estate brokerages, who are always recruiting talent. Brokerages can use stats to find agents that best suit their needs. Think of the data you already have as puzzle pieces. The old way, like the scouts who used to use their subjective observations, we call that management by guesswork. Instead, we're going to encourage you to start playing Moneyball. Everyone has this data, but not many are using it. So until today. Now, having said that, there are times to trust your gut on decisions, but data never lies. For example, what's your cost per agent and return on investment on all your processes? Do you know? Many of you don't, and today we're going to show you how. Next slide. So are your offices too big? If this looks familiar to you, we're going to talk about that. So next to commission payouts, I'm sure you know that office rent is the second largest cost brokerages have. But here's what you may not know. What is your square footage per agent? And then your rent spent per agent. Many brokerages have over 200 square feet per agent, which is not necessary in today's mobile and transient economy, right? Ideally, you want 100 square feet per agent, maybe even 50. If you think about how agents work today in a Starbucks at a table with a laptop and a cell phone, you don't need to provide the private offices that maybe once ruled the landscape. Another strategy to consider is having many more smaller offices throughout the market than several larger offices. The old adage, location, 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 is still true. By having more smaller offices, you can maximize your signage and your presence in the market, and you can say to your clients more often, yes, we have an office in that location. And for these offices, focus on providing the basics, workspaces versus private offices, and consider virtual office solutions that are available via cloud-based solutions. Some of that extends to things like telephony. So if you get a virtual PBX, services like Dialpad, which lets you use your cell phone or your laptop as a telephone, and it can be available anywhere. Brokerages can also provide services like call action, which provide every agent with their own phone number, but yet uses their cell phones that they already have and are paying for. The upside of using a service like call action, you get to track your advertising effectiveness, you can automatically engage new buyers, and calls can be transcribed and pushed into your CRM for later tracking. Some of you may already use some cloud-based document storage like Dropbox or Google Drive. That's a great first start. Other services are available like transaction management, things like Brokerment or DocuSign's transaction room that lets you centralize all documents surrounding a deal so all the stakeholders can view documents and follow what needs to be done from any location. Next slide. So are you retaining and recruiting the right agents? This is not often addressed by brokerages for reasons we discussed earlier. If you think agents aren't costing you anything, unprofitable agents are typically never let go. However, to best invest in the support you provide your agents, you need to look at your ROI in them as well. And while it's true no commissions are paid unless agents produce, nevertheless you are paying many hidden costs. In any agent, you've invested X in the form of office space, telecom, staff support, marketing support, MLS fees, and more. And you got back Y. It's a simple equation, which is bigger. But you need to look at beyond GCI and some of these hidden costs. You need to look at some of agent intangibles. Is it possible that they're worth keeping around? They've got a good attitude, customers like them, and they're capable of learning. So you can provide some training and maybe turn that equation around. And so when you evaluate what you get back from the agent, consider all the factors beyond GCI. How many people did they recruit? Maybe they're a recruiting dynamo and they're not a high producer, but you're still getting value from that given agent. And what's their listings carry? We talk about this in the Management by Guesswork workbook. They may not do a ton of business, but maybe they get a listing that's on Central and Main in your downtown area, and the signage is phenomenal promotional value. After you do this analysis, by eliminating truly unprofitable agents, you can invest more in giving productive agents what they want. And what do they want? Well, from a recent NAR poll, the top thing agents want from their brokerage is support. Provide adequate support and they'll be fighting over the leads and support you provide and not commission rates. Providing agent support through tech is what TRIBUS focuses on, and we'll talk more about that again later. Next slide. So are you using any form of management reporting system? So if you're going to play Moneyball, you need data, and you need a way to find it and use it effectively. This is how you're going to find those diamonds in the rough. And we're not talking about just sold data or listing data, but profitability reports as well. You may find that your profits, your income statement may show that you are break even or slightly profitable or a small loss. But if you dig a little deeper, you may find that most of your offices are excelling. and a couple are lagging far behind, causing an overall weaker picture. You know, this sort of data is always available. It's just waiting to be used in your processes. You can use the data to better categorize your agents as well. The trend can be your friend no matter what the picture says. So you can highlight very productive agents, which is probably going to be fairly obvious to you, but using interesting data, you can highlight agents who need more training, or highlight agents who simply need to go. They're no longer a fit for your brokerage. You know, this kind of reporting can highlight agent specialties you may not even know. This is how you find your Moneyball agents. An agent may virtually own an entire neighborhood market without realizing it. Or an agent may have, from the data, you'll see that every listing appointment they go on, they close that business. Are those transferable skills that you can use and transfer to other agents via training or coaching? You know, you may have agents that are great at getting the listing, but the on-market time is way below market average, suggesting they're appeasing an unrealistic seller or aren't keyed into the market. This results in higher marketing costs and slower cash flow from more days on market. But now you know how to empower these agents if you have clearer data. One other management reporting system that we can talk about are Net Promoter Scores. These are surveys the brokerage can send to your agents. If you've never heard of a Net Promoter Score, you undoubtedly have come across them. They're a single question survey asking something in the form of, how likely are you to recommend this agent to a friend or colleague on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm sure you've all seen these. This is really powerful data. Agents that tend to score highly tend to mean their clients are more likely to promote them, hence the Net Promoter Score name, to promote them to others as a referral service or repeat business. So by constantly polling an agent's customers, you can start to get a very clear picture over time over the kind of service that they're delivering. And you may find you have good profits or bad profits. What is that? Good profits are agents that make a lot of money and everybody loves them, so you get a lot of repeat and referral business from them. Bad profits are agents who do a lot of business, but they churn their clients, a lot of one-and-done business. They're bad for growth because they are not leaving a good name in the marketplace. And you don't necessarily need to make these scores public, but they're great for internal review. Next slide. So understanding your cost structure and the levers for increasing GCI are key to success. You know, the good news is you have the data to create intelligent analysis to make your brokerage leaner and more profitable. Hopefully this information gives you the foundation to conduct these analyses for yourself. Next slide. So there are many other areas of analysis we didn't cover here, such as telecom costs, staffing expense, marketing expenses, and to help go through that all, we've created a Management by Guesswork workbook to walk you through an analysis of your brokerage and help get your arms around some of these metrics. And we'll tell you how to get your free copy at the end of this webinar. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jeff. That was awesome. There were some really good things to think about in there. Next up, we're going to have Deirdre LaPera from Real Trends, and she's going to give us a little bit of her perspective on Brokerage Moneyball.
Thanks, Lori. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I just want to dive in a little bit deeper on some of the topics, the great topics that Jeff has already brought up. And I think the first one we'll tackle is really looking at office space. So if we could move to the next slide, please. And looking at office space, we all know, right, that when we look at office expenses, that it's generally 20% of your gross margin when you're coming in, and that's a huge number. And it's always, we hear brokerages talking about all the time, how can we cut this cost? How do we minimize this cost? What are some strategies? And we conducted a survey earlier this year that looked at, well, why are we having an office altogether? Why isn't everyone getting rid of an office? And so we looked at education, support. People like the meeting space in general, and culture are what we found were the biggest reasons of why agents say they come into the office. A big part of, you have younger agents. A lot of people think millennial agents, they don't need office space. Well, that was untrue in our findings in terms of a lot of them were in for training, right? Which is pretty obvious when you look at it from that point of view, that they need that interaction with staff. They need that time with a broker or with a mentor type relationship. They need a space to come and meet and do that. We also saw gathering space for company meetings and just general outside of work activities to take place was huge also in terms of building that culture of a brand. And we could go to the next slide, please. And so before you're looking at taking down your office space or what you're doing, or if you're looking at minimizing office spaces, so, okay, well, what are the layouts that are really out there? Open office concepts have been wildly popular the last 5 years, and we've seen a lot of people shift towards that. And then now recently, in the last, I'd say 12 months, we're seeing a slight pullback of people starting to incorporate more and more of those semi-private spaces in their office space. So they're not fully open, and everyone has an opportunity to, yes, interact, but they also have the opportunity, if they need to make a private phone call, have a meeting uninterrupted without traffic coming in or coming by their space, that they're able to do that. And that's a big trend that we're seeing in terms of, don't just get rid of your office space, think about repurposing your spaces in there. If we could go to the next slide. Also, we're looking at office space and how it fosters productivity in agents. We found in our study that sales associates who spent over 20 hours in the office were more likely to double their transaction volume. This could be for a variety of reasons. We realize that it could be the team leader who's in there making sure that the lead generation systems are up and running and properly functioning. It could be that just dedicated individual agent who's in there 80 hours a week doing everything that they need to do. But it's creating this space for them to have productivity, to create that synergy and energy in the office environment for other people to see, take note, and do that. And although you can switch up office spaces in a variety of ways in terms of doing hoteling spaces, where, like the hotel concept, where you have desk space, but you don't necessarily have designated desk space, and it could be smaller spaces. I know in this study in particular, we interviewed at properties, and they had great insight in terms of, their agents never had big offices to begin with, so they didn't necessarily expect to have these big offices or these big workspaces. So thinking through when you're looking at restructuring is, yes, it's important to create workspace for people to be at, understand how often they'll probably be there, and then go forward and do what makes most sense to the culture of your firm. And diving into this a little bit further, reasons maybe why. Why wouldn't you take down your office space, or why wouldn't you look at decreasing space? I know Jeff had a good point too in terms of mapping out, stretching out your office space among a variety of locations, maybe not a big one centrally located office, but multiple smaller ones. But something that we looked at in terms of just general size and office space is teams. A lot of companies, right, have teams nowadays. We're estimated there's roughly 50,000 teams out in the industry at this point in time, whose average size are probably the 3 to 9 person team. And so where does that function? Where does that fit in terms of how you're doing your data planning and looking at occupancy? And these are just some stats you can see here for performance of teams and maybe why it's important to keep them involved. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we're looking at sales volume and the total sales volume that real estate teams produced for the firms that we interviewed and surveyed. And obviously you can tell it's a big chunk for a majority of them that bring in this revenue, this income. So how do you support that and do that in a way that's beneficial? And so that's what leads us back to that argument too of, when you're considering your space options, you'll probably have a revenue plan to help support that. When we're looking at the average number of teams and brokerages, you can see it's not that many per se, 1 to 3 teams maybe, but if you have 1 to 3 teams who are 9+ people in size, that's something considerable to account for in your planning. And we can go to the next slide, please. Other things to think about when it comes to data. Data is very, very valuable, but sometimes there's hidden stories underneath your data. And when you look at cutting costs or doing something different, we always like to go, well, why? Why are we spending this? What's the point of this? Technology is one of them. Technology is a cost too that can feel like it's creeping up on some people. So what's something that you can do and look at and evaluate what you're doing with your tech systems? We estimate that most firms spend about 11% of their monthly budget on technology, or 5% of their annual gross margin is spent on technology. And if you're unfamiliar with calculating your gross margin, all you have to do is to look at your total GCI, deduct your referral fees, your commission fees, and any franchise fees, and that should give you your gross margin to base what those numbers should be and what your spend should look like benchmarked against your peers. We can go to the next slide, please. And so that going back to that question of prioritizing which technology system do I need the most? What makes the most sense to help me grow and maintain my business? We found obviously company website was #1. That's your central hub for communication and for being out there and being visible, followed by others that are vastly important to just everyday conducting your business. Something that we stress when we're looking at investment and data and what you're spending in these particular areas is that this will never be a set it and forget it solution. This is something you'll constantly be evaluating. It'll be shifting capabilities, integrations of systems, or things that you just can't overlook nowadays. And you just want to be prepared to always be agile in this area. And I think, Lori, I'll throw it back to you. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Your first slide really was interesting to me, talking about the generational differences of why people come to the office. And I think that pointing out about the millennials is we think they're also techie and they don't really need the space, but they really do like to come together for the collaboration part of it. So having somewhere to go is important.
Yeah. No, it's wildly important. And in my office in particular, which we're not real estate per se, but we're about 50% or more millennial in our office, and we have private office space, we have a communal space, and we have conference rooms. I would say we spend about an equal portion of time between all three. So it's definitely something nice to correct some perceptions from the millennial standpoint. Right.
I've seen a lot of companies recently going towards, there's the co-working spaces that are in kind of bigger cities these days, that there have been some real estate firms that's kind of the way they've gone. So it's not even just them in the building, they are sharing space with a lot of different other types of industries. So it's all very interesting, though, the types of office space and how we should be using them. So that was great. Thank you. Next up, we have Brenda Tushouse. She is the COO of Remax Results, and she's going to start kind of telling us what it's like in actual practice, how she uses all of this data and the metrics in an actual day-to-day. Brenda?
Hi, Lori. Thanks, guys. Can everybody hear me, hopefully? So I have a little bit of a different approach as the broker on the panel. I'm going to share with you actual metrics that we use in making staffing decisions in our branch offices and centralized services, like our tech and marketing departments. I'm also going to give you 2 examples of how we made decisions on technology spend based on data that we collected. And if there's time, I have a few takeaways at the very end. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, here is a sampling of data. We have a practice of measuring our listing input data and our showing data in all of our branch office locations. Each of our offices is staffed with 1 to 4 front desk employees. And several years ago, we started tracking showing and listing data to identify that ideal target range based on the offices that were running the most efficient. You'll see on this slide, this is just a sampling of our offices. I think I have 13 of our 37 offices here. We have the offices highlighted in green. Sorry, the offices highlighted in green here are the offices that are hitting what we identified long ago as our target range. They're processing 3,000 to 5,000 listings and showings per year per full-time staff. But you'll notice Office A, as I've marked here, the one in red, is starting to outperform that target range. Last year in 2016, they had 6,300 showings and listings per staff. And this is where we start to pay attention to see if that range is continuing to exceed the target. We start to keep an eye on our employee sanity. And if it consists, for example, at the end of 2017, if it's still outperforming that target range, that's when we step back and ask ourselves if we need to increase those 2 1/4 staff in that office, for example, by another part-time or full-time front desk person to help manage that workload. Maybe there's a growth of agents or a mega team that's taking over in that office or what have you. But This is just a nice way of continually tracking the right way of staffing, the right amount of staffing in those offices. You'll also see that I included a couple of sample offices that are well below that target range of 3,000 to 5,000 listings and showings. And that's where we start using those offices, those front desk staff specifically for other services. Some of our what's normally centralized services, we decentralize. We identified one office perhaps to be a backup call center for our IT department. We have some of the front desk staff at other offices part-time providing executive support for our executive team. And we also have offices at our business centers, otherwise known as hubs, that help also process commission checks outside of our normal central office. Next slide, please. And here is, this is more of our staffing ratios. This is showing you our ideal staff to agent ratios based on agent head count. So when it comes to centralized staffing services, I'm specifically talking about marketing support, training, IT support, sales processing. We determined our ideal staff to agent ratios based on customer satisfaction surveys. Those surveys would measure, we would use those surveys to measure our agent satisfaction in each of the different areas of service to identify whether those services, those departments were staffed accurately. And we've tried to maintain that ratio in each of those departments as our company has grown. As you can see, we have, for example, one IT support person for every 100 to 200 agents. We have one dedicated trainer for every 400 to 500 agents, and so on. Obviously, brokers need to focus more on just agent headcount when you're considering staffing. If your agent count is growing, but your company, for example, your company transactions are not, or if your per agent production numbers are slipping, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to add sales accounting staff. You're retaining the right agents. So this chart probably should have another line on it that measures our production as well, like our overall sales units. Specifically, we track those when considering whether we need to add to our sales accounting department. Maintaining a 1 to 100 ratio for sales accounting personnel, it doesn't necessarily work if only half of those agents are selling real estate. So this year we'll close over 23,000 units, and we have almost 8 employees processing those transactions. So of course you do have to consider other ratios besides agent headcount. You have to measure your per transactions for those certain centralized services. There's other things you can consider, you know, such as if you're facing a decision on a new back office accounting software or a different transaction management system, you know, determining whether, you know, investing $40,000 a year in that new system, will it replace the need for 2 more full-time processors, for example? And then also referring back to some of the items I had on the previous slide, if any of those areas can be decentralized, if you have offices that aren't, that do not have as much output, for example, that's when you can decentralize some of this and maybe add marketing coordinators or sales commission processors in those other offices. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an example of how we use data to make decisions on our technology spend. This first example, this was about 3 years ago, we were faced with the decision of continue with portal advertising, the large real estate portal, or instead shift that technology spend to offer an additional CRM option for our agents. So again, on this decision, we needed the data. We collected the data via another survey. If you don't have the data, you can always get it. Instead of the typical SurveyMonkey surveys that we use to measure customer satisfaction, for this particular survey, it was more hands-on. We actually had our sales accounting staff call when they were processing 1,000 transactions. They called to not only congratulate the agent on the sale, but they also quizzed them live on the phone and said, hey, what's the source of this business for this check I'm processing? And here's the results. You can see 90% of the business from that random survey of 1,000 transactions was from Sphere or past clients. So that helped us kind of solidify the decision we were leaning towards. And at that time, we shifted our money to a new, improved alternative CRM tool. Since we've been using the CRM system, we have, in 3 years, we've grown to almost a 40% adoption rate on this tool. Our associates have their choice of 3 different CRM systems, actually. And this is obviously the most popular one. 40% adoption rate is something that I've never seen. Typically, we see 15 to 20% on any of our tech or marketing tools. So that speaks volumes to us. So we keep an eye on the adoption rate. The other thing that we are measuring is the metrics of the agents using the CRM system. We have identified people as what we call super users, although I think I'm going to use Jeff's term, Moneyball agents, and measuring those people that are the super users of the CRM system. We look at when they became super users of this system, when they started using it to its full capacity, and we compare their 12 months of production prior to using the tool against their 12-month production post-adoption. And we haven't shared those results yet with our agents, but we will likely with those super users' permission. We'll publish those results internally, and we'll use it as a way to continue growing the adoption of this particular tool. Next slide, please. This is my second example of a decision that we made using data. So this was just within the last year, we were faced with a goal. Our goal was to increase traffic to our website. So all we wanted to do was increase traffic to our website, and we had a two-part. We had a decision: either maintain our existing service agreement with our existing web vendor and invest in Google AdWords to drive that traffic, or shift website vendors entirely for a platform that we knew had proven results in the SEO area. Obviously, moving with AdWords would have been the easier and far less disruptive route for our agents, but we chose the latter, and we shifted vendors entirely to a new platform. And we set a very realistic goal, and we're still in the early stages. It's about 45 days post-launch, and so far we're maintaining steady traffic increases of 25 to 35% month over month, week over week. And now we're measuring rather the savings that we are seeing. So for example, this is just a very simplistic example I have on the screen here of what we could get, for example, if we spent money with Google AdWords using very minimal average cost per click of $2 per click or $4 per click. Obviously, we know it's typically much more than that. But let's say our goal was to increase our website traffic by 30,000 new users a month. At $2 a click, that would be $60,000 worth of AdWords. So what we're doing now is just measuring our savings compared to our investment, and just making sure that we maintain this consistent growth with our website. Obviously, the next obvious question is tracking conversion rates and closed business from the website. It's a little soon for that now, but that's the next thing that we'll be working on. Next slide, please. So this is just a few takeaways for everyone. I just recommend what to consider for your tech and marketing. Always track your agent adoption. If you're not tracking it, data's easy to collect. Is your agent adoption on all of your tools, all of your tech marketing tools? Is it growing? Is it flat? Is it decreasing? You should know the numbers. My second comment here is: are you working with vendors that charge based on usage versus brokerage headcount? Be sure to ask for that pricing model when you are talking to vendors, when you're talking to new tools that you're considering. I'm happy because I'm seeing more and more companies that are willing to go that per active user route versus charging a flat fee based on your number of offices or based on your agent headcount. Tech partners, I feel that the tech partners who are using that model with us are far more engaged because they're far more engaged. They're helping us with our agents because obviously they want to help us increase our agent adoption as well. Also, of the products you're using, as I gave in the example of the CRM, and I mentioned super users, of product X, are those agents outperforming those that are not using that product? Can you connect their success to that product? Measure before and after. And then, of course, my last takeaway is just to constantly evaluate your tech marketing options. Review, if not quarterly, at least annually. And that is all I have for you.
Thanks, Brenda. That was great. I actually, that second takeaway there I really like because so often, you know, vendors approach us as brokers and they're selling us a product based on the total agent count when we know that adoption is going to be significantly less than that total number. And why do I want to pay for, you know, a significant percentage of my agents that they're not going to use it? So I like the idea of really moving more towards actual head count of users, which makes more sense. And they'll always kind of reply that oh, well, we take that into account. I'm like, well, I don't, how? You know, explain that to me. So definitely some good points there. So that was great. I think there was lots of different perspectives there. And now we're going to go to a little bit of Q&A. And I'm going to throw a question out there to start, and kind of, you know, all or one or two of you can answer. But I mean, so there's a lot of data here. Where does a broker go to start gathering this data? Where are the best sources for them to start looking to get all these numbers? Who wants to jump in?
I'll go ahead. I'll take a stab at that. This is Brenda. Depending on the tool, obviously if it's your website, Google Analytics, your web vendor can help you with that. Any other marketing, if it's a marketing tool, a listing tool, you can typically get logins, usage, that sort of report from your vendor. Let's say you're considering, another thing I thought of mentioning is, let's say you have a listing marketing tool that you provide to your agents. Maybe it's a photography service or a Facebook advertising marketing service for your listing. Those agents that are using it, you have that data at your fingertips on the MLS. I mean, you can go and you can look at their, is that tool, since they started using it, is it helping their days on market? Is it helping their average sale price? You can do a lot of before-after analysis. Obviously, the more examples, the more accurate data you'll have, but that's one idea, or a few ideas, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And I could add to that just a touch, Lori. We use, you know, a good P&L, a good clean P&L that's tightened up from the beginning, and just, you know, tracking your expenses to begin with, so you know where things are at. You'd be surprised how much you'd find out that doesn't happen, or, you know, costs are associated from one tool to another area, and then it just kind of makes things messy to understand really what your full on, you know, return on revenue is, and maybe a certain product or strategy that you're trying if you don't have a good understanding from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and from my perspective, there are tools. At TRIBUS, we have some tools called Coach that let you kind of analyze agent behavior. But another thing brokerages can use is these growing in popularity transaction management platforms that let you connect a lead that may be generated from a website or a third-party site all the way through conversion, through a contract, through a closing, so you can really better accurately kind of measure true return on marketing spend. So you can see the revenue generated versus the lead acquisition costs. You can have some pretty good pictures on guidance there as well.
Right. So, I mean, it really sounds like you're going to probably be collecting data from several sources and integrating it together to really see how it's impacting your business. So you're going to have to look at several different places, and, you know, it's not going to be, oh, I click this button and then that's going to give me this magic number that I want to see. Right?
Right.
It depends on the platforms you're using, right? I mean, that's a lot of times, a lot of data is siloed in various different platforms. It depends on the vendor. I know we try and kind of aggregate all that data and make it easy by integrating with a lot of third-party services to pull that data in. So we give our customers the ability to kind of see a single dashboard that can help aggregate a lot of that third-party data. But otherwise, it can be tough.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things I think, Jeff, you were talking about was, we're looking at agents and really kind of reducing them to a number. But isn't it more than about just a number? I mean, aren't there other factors we really need to consider?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? So the black and white analysis may start with a number, and then you want to add some meat to those bones. And you can look at some both subjective and other qualitative factors. As we talked about a little bit earlier, you can see, is this person an active recruiter? Are they a good internal coach? Do they provide ancillary value? It's probably not wise to simply focus solely on GCI, for example. You should take a holistic approach, but certainly to kind of identify where problems exist, that's a good place to start, and then we said color in the lines a little bit more with some of this other information.
Right. So let's say we use some of this data and we can kind of identify agents that maybe aren't doing as well as we feel like they should be doing. What can we do to help them become more profitable?
Great question. So there are tools available. We talked about I talked about some management reporting systems. Coach is a platform that we have that actually will, here's a great example. You can see how many leads an agent gets in the system, how many deals that translated to how many closings. And so you can start to see the relationship. For example, if an agent is getting 100 leads, for example, and has only one deal, that might be indicative of a problem closing the deal, or with their presentation, or with their listing presentation, or their pitch. So you can start by using these tools to look at some numbers, identify what may or may not be working, and that's a coaching opportunity. Furthermore, they may be taking, they may be great at getting a listing, and it may just sit on the market for a long time. And maybe they're getting browbeat by their seller, or maybe they just don't understand how the market works to better price their listing. So those are all kinds of data that can suggest either a coaching opportunity, and when you take some of that subjective or qualitative analysis, you could say, well, this person is just not going to learn or change their ways, and that's an opportunity to either coach up or move them out.
I like how you put it as it's a coaching opportunity, because I think a lot of people fear that like the numbers are going to immediately say, well, they're not doing so well, so I'm going to boot them. But that's not really the case. I mean, you want people to succeed, but it might help you to identify the specific areas where they do need help, and help you to put together training that really specifically reaches out to those areas.
Yeah, and hopefully the numbers that you're looking at that may suggest that there's a problem aren't, that those are shared with the agent anytime they want, so they can log in and kind of see how they're doing, so they don't get that surprise email, come on, I need to see you in my office today, and then it goes south from there. By giving them an opportunity to to see the same metrics you're seeing, gives them a chance to kind of self-evaluate.
And maybe it's not really, I mean, the way I'm thinking about it now is it's not necessarily just, it's not a problem with, maybe it's a problem with the broker that then they're able to identify so that they can serve the agents better. If they see there's an area maybe that all the agents are struggling with, then they know I need to do a better job here.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's all about having the right tools that let you kind of take that Moneyball approach to give you the data to see where someone is succeeding, where someone's struggling, and where someone is really just not doing well.
Okay, sounds good. So let's see, any other questions out? If any of our listeners out there have any questions, somebody asked if they can have the slides. Well, definitely, this is going to be recorded so you can access them all again at that point. One person asked about what the silent generation is. I think that was on one of Deirdre's slides. So do we have any information about that?
I think they classify that now as, I think, 66 and up. So I know everyone likes to term it differently, but yeah, that's what that generation is noted by.
And we have a few of those in real estate. With our being honest.
Yeah. Right, and unsurprisingly, right, they're the ones most diligent about coming to the office. I mean, that was their thing. That they considered their office, that's their meeting space, you know, which makes a lot of sense.
Well, that was, the traditional way as they were started working and throughout their lifetime, so that's how they approach it. But I really did love that slide because it really took into account how there are so many different ways that people look at office space, and age is a significant factor in that. So you might look at who your agents are, number one, in order to determine what kind of space you need to be providing. So I thought that was
wholeheartedly. And I should mention that full study is in the handout section, that redefining the relevancy of workspace. So if anyone is interested in diving into the numbers and looking at, there's a lot more information to look at how that trends out in other scenarios.
Yeah.
I think,
so we talked. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to comment on something that Deirdre said. There has been a shift as we've grown, expanded, added offices, or remodeled existing offices. There's been a huge shift in the way we are repurposing our space. We're adding a lot more open space, a lot more training rooms where we didn't have them before. But our offices are also designed unique by market. So we're spread out across several markets. And for example, our St. Cloud market, which isn't too far outside of the Twin Cities, 97% of our agents in our St. Cloud market all commute in and all have private office space. And so we designed our office based on that need when we remodeled that last office, as compared to urban offices. The couple of locations in our downtown Minneapolis location have a lot of very open, collaborative, drop-in hotel type spaces. So we are sensitive to the different regions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're kind of like, we're a small brokerage, but we have two offices, and one of them is very traditional kind of office space with a conference room, but then we have one that is actually located in more of a retail type space with, it's an open, very kind of Starbucks meets Restoration Hardware look to it, and it's very cool. And we get walk-ins there because we are kind of attached to retail, and they love the space, so they just come in and talk to us. And one of the we'll convert some of them. Yep.
Awesome.
So talking about office space, we had that square footage per agent number. So okay, that can be pretty easy to calculate. You figure out the square footage of your office and how many agents you have, and then you have that number. But what does it mean? And what is truly a good number? And what should we be thinking about with that?
Well, I can take that. So starting with the square footage per number, that's really kind of help you benchmark if you're right-sized in your market. Like Brenda was saying, her downtown offices can be a little smaller. People are more used to hoteling. So that's just kind of gets you a metric for identifying if you are in the ballpark of what you need. The next step you would take is try to identify what your rent per agent is. So along the lines of once you identify how many, what your rent is, and you can divide that by the number of agents, and you get a rent per agent. When you start to evaluate agents in terms of trying to provide maximum services and trying to see if there's any agents that should be retained or whether there needs to be a separation, that is certainly a number that comes into the equation. As we said, rent is a pretty big expense. So if you have high square footage per agent and your rent costs are high, that's going to mean that your agents need to be a little bit more productive to justify and defend the support that the brokers is providing to them.
Mm-hmm. So this kind of just popped into my head. I was thinking about this. Kind of traditionally in real estate offices, brokers would, not all, there's all kinds of different models, but you would basically rent space to an agent. They would rent their office. But now that we're trending away from all that personal office space into more open workspace, that's going to change. It's going to change potentially an income stream, if you want to call it that, or at least it's deferring some of our costs or expense for brokers. So that's going to be a change in the way some brokers work, right?
Well, it can also be an opportunity, Lori, too, with the other, we've seen some firms that, you know, they built their brick and mortar stuff in, you know, 2000 around there, and then and that's their investment that they don't necessarily just want to jump out of, and that they're looking at partnering with other service providers, you know, like service providers, maybe an insurance agent rents a desk out of there, or maybe it's a home warranty or something else that's associated that's relevant to the industry or relevant to what their agents may need. But it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily have to be then the agent or the brokerage, you know, taking on that cost.
Okay, well, that's pretty interesting. Just a lot of thoughts, as you know, it's a whole new model that's going to be coming. I think, yeah, I agree totally that I love the more open kind of workspace idea and the collaboration that can come out of that. I mean, obviously, you do have to have some private areas available for, you know, conversations that people are going to have. But I think it is going to, you know, change the way we all function, and even economically, it's going to change things a little bit. But so we're gonna, I think that's about it. I have one more question, which I think is the million-dollar question that if anybody can answer it, they're going to be the winner here. But it's like, what's the most popular CRM? Because we were talking, that kind of came up in the conversation. And I know that's not what this is all about, but there's a lot of them out there. And I'll tell you my answer to that question. The best CRM is the one you're going to use.
Yes, I agree.
I agree. I agree.
That's a pretty good answer.
There you go. So I think that's the best answer to that question. Find the one that's going to work for you and that you're going to use every day, because that's the only way it's ever going to work. But so I want to give everybody one last chance. If there's anything you want to kind of throw in here as we wrap things up, feel free.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind talking a little bit about TRIBUS.
Okay, go ahead.
You know, we talked a lot about brokerage operations today, and at TRIBUS we really believe in brokerages, and we exist to kind of help them achieve their goals, and we immerse ourselves in each client to really kind of craft a meaningful experience for them, and we do that by creating custom platforms to best engage their clients, agents, and staff. Next slide. You know, for brokerages that are with really specific design goals, we create fully custom brokerage websites where we work with our clients to go through an intensive design process so they get all the features and functionality they want. We want to make sure we match the branding and the personality throughout their website and CRM. Not only can we customize the front end, the brokerage, but agent websites as well, and CRM. So to Lori's question, I'm partial to TRIBUS' CRM, but you probably could have predicted that. Next slide. You know, and for those brokers that want same functionality as a custom solution, but they are looking for a more affordable solution and a faster launch time, we offer semi-custom brokerage websites, again, with brokerage and agent sites and CRM functionality as well. Next slide. Coach, this is really when we talk about management reporting systems at the agent productivity level. Coach is our tool. It's a new product that really kind of allows brokers and agents to check in on an agent. Lets agents set a goal for themselves, and using transaction data can come back and see how they're doing against their goal. It's available 24/7, and as you can see on the left edge of that slide there, in addition to sales volume, there's metrics on sales funnel, which talks about what we talked about with Lori earlier. It talks about, go back, Michael. It talks about leads, converting to opportunities, to deals and closings. So you can really identify those agents who are kicking it and those who are really struggling. Go ahead. And from the broker side of things, Coach provides you a dashboard of your agents and their goals, so you can quickly identify agents with high goals. You can see goals by office. You can see agents who are at or above their process levels. So in addition to this great data in identifying the Moneyball agents here, this really creates an opportunity for the brokerage to engage with their agents on a periodic basis, whether it's quarterly, monthly, weekly, what have you, and sit down and provide those coaching opportunities based on what the data shows. So it really becomes a great retention tool for brokerages as well. Go ahead, Michael. Talking about CRM, this is a little snapshot of our CRM. The upshot of this CRM, maybe compared to some others, it's connected to your website, so all buyer activity can be captured in your CRM. You can see all the properties they've looked at, the properties they've rated, the searches they've executed, the searches they've saved, and so on and so forth. And it's all presented in almost like a Facebook timeline kind of fashion. Go ahead, next. Integrations, this is kind of where TRIBUS really shines. There are a lot of tools out there. We've talked about some throughout today. It's really our strong suit. We play nice with others. We probably integrate with over 150 different third-party vendors. And aside from realizing what we do best and working with others who do what they do best, this really reduces friction for the brokerage and its agents. So if a brokerage or an agent is using a third-party tool in their process, there's no reason to give it up just because you're moving to a TRIBUS platform. Data that can flow to and from our CRM with these third-party sites, making it really easy and a central place to capture all your data. Next. And third, something I can't really show you well on a slide is our concierge support. We have outstanding support. We're available 11 hours a day for our agents and staff. And we are US-based, and we are available via chat, via phone, via email, and we've got 100% agent satisfaction rating. This is a poll we take after each one of our customer service interactions. So it really makes adoption of technology, I think something Brenda alluded to earlier, really key. If you don't have proper support, it's kind of tough to make sure agents are using the technology the brokerage is providing. You can see a quote there from J.D. Calvin from BHHS Vision. He loved that little black button and hit it hard when he was onboarding with us, and was very pleased with the response. He continues to use that service to today. Next. And so for those of you, I teased it earlier in the presentation, this is how you get the Management by Guesswork workbook. All of those on here can go to tribusgroup.com/metrics and download the workbook. It covers other categories that we didn't get a chance to talk about today, but it really gives you a step-by-step opportunity to help analyze your brokerage and find out where you may have opportunities for some savings. And that's it for me. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to thank all of our guests that were here today, Jeff Harris, Deirdre LaPera, and Brenda Tushouse. And you all did a great job, and you brought a lot of information for us to think about. I think, so often we get caught up just in the day-to-day, in the office, that we need to stop and think about some of these things to help us manage things a little bit better. But thank you again, and thank you to TRIBUS for sponsoring today. And I'm going to throw it back to Devin if he's out there.
All right, thanks so much again, and thank you to the audience for spending part of your day with us. We really appreciate it. And echoing Lori's thanks to TRIBUS. Thanks for making this possible. A great session. And again, we will kick a recording to everybody by email later this afternoon. And I guess we'll just see you next time. Thanks so much to everybody who participated, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.